This is my 2015 Ford Focus.
I'm just kidding, it's not that kind of video, but this is my DIY studio light that both has a bunch of RGB, it's got cool lighting and warm lighting, and it can dim, and the whole thing is collapsible. Yeah, why didn't you just buy some lights instead of doing this in the first place? That's a good question. A pair of basic film lights from Walmart are about $50, but while I could spend the money on those, I'm going to be an engineer. That's what I'm kind of going to school for. So I figured, why not start doing engineering projects like this? Like building my own things. I mean, I've already built one light before, so why can't I just build some more? But like most engineers, I was a little overconfident with my abilities going into this project. Not having all that much knowledge on design or woodworking caused a lot of problems to happen. So this turned out to be quite the challenging project for me. For the first design, I made a box with only 4 pieces of wood and 4 hinges, and that way it would require less moving parts and just less pieces overall. But once I had it designed, I realized that when it's folded, it'll be really long, and that would make it more cumbersome to carry around, so I pretty much scratched that idea. For design number 2, I decided I wanted it to collapse in on itself. That way I could put a handle on the top of it that would both function in the collapse mode and whenever it's opened up to carry it around. Now this also had its own issues, like for example, the light strips that would cross the hinge part would either need to be stretched or have a way to expand with the rotation. I also realized that it would have to have some space for the light strips to live without being squished, but I think I'd take these challenges over a more cumbersome design. After I chose to build the second design, I thought it would be cool if the same latch that held it closed would also hold it open. So I spent 2 days trying to figure out the best possible solution while keeping to the core values of the build, making it cheap, easy to use, and easy to make. After many failed ideas, I went to bed only to lie awake thinking of possible solutions. Then it hit me. Magnets. Now that I'm done cooking on a design, I'm ready to build. Day 1 of the build started off smoothly. I had a piece of walnut laid against the wall left over from another project. I'm going with a 3/4 inch overall width, so this board was just a little bit thicker than what I wanted it to be, and it was also a little bit bowed, so I took it to the planer just to take a little bit of that thickness off and to flatten it out a little bit better. All the wood that I use for my projects are actually the wood from my grandmother's ground, which was my late grandfather's. My grandfather would cut and dry his own wood for every project, but now that he's gone, all this extra wood is being left over and wasted, so I'm hoping to make him proud by giving it some good use. I'm using walnut for this build because it's lightweight, and I think the dark color will keep reflections off it more easily. Like most things in life, picking a type of wood is such a trade-off because you either have to pick a wood with a hard density, which is stronger, or you pick a more lightweight wood that is a little bit more weak. Luckily for this project, structural integrity is not a major issue. I've also just been a sucker for walnut. I don't know what it is about it. I think the dark color and the marbly look that it has, I think it just looks great. Let me tell you what now, I came across a lot of issues during the building process. The first one I was greeted to was with the table saw. As soon as I turned the table saw on, the entire table started shaking vigorously. It turns out the belt that connects the blade to the motor was really worn out and frayed, and it just caused a lot of vibrations. Now, I've never had to deal with that before, but I could tell as soon as I turned it on that this is definitely a dangerous situation to be working with. I feel like the table saw truly lives up to its name as being the most dangerous type of saw. I started with the boards along the perimeter of the project. I wanted to make sure the estimated size of the light wouldn't be too big or too small, which led me to the problem number 2. Remember how I said I wanted it to be 3/4 inch? Well, that wasn't the original plan. It was going to be a 1/2 inch thick board, but then that would make the boards thinner than the controller for the LEDs. Now I could have just glued 2 boards together, but I feel like that would have made me had to cut holes for the controller, so I just went with 3/4 inch instead. It'll all make sense later in the video. So I just came across a new issue with these hinges. They're too long for my next plan that I was putting into action. I don't know why I thought this would work, but I thought I could have it like this. That way I can cut grooves in there and there so that the LED strips wouldn't be squishing each other. And that will not fit at all. So now I switched over to this side and I realized that this would work, but now that LED strip will get crushed, and that's a major pinch point that I gotta fix. Okay, here's the plan. So I just figured out that if I just take one of these cables, this thing is fine being bent, I think, for an extended period of time. I think it'll be okay. I'm gonna put this cable inside of here, and hopefully that'll get rid of the excessive bending over time. And then I realized that the LEDs are gonna get squished by the hinge, like right in here. So I'm actually gonna take a little piece of wood and stick it in here, maybe just like glue it or something like that. That way it'll stay propped up and not have the LEDs get all squished up. So I got it mocked up. I think it's looking pretty good. The clearances are looking pretty good. And I just noticed that in here, I feel like this is gonna be another bad pinch point that I'm gonna be working with. I just feel like when the cables are gonna get folded up right here in the center, it might pinch. I'm also not entirely sure if I explained the grooves yet. I'm just gonna cut a slot in here, just enough to where the light isn't shining directly at the diffuser, and hopefully that'll look pretty good. So on top of cutting the grooves inside of here for the cables to go, I'm also gonna cut it along here, just to make sure that they don't get squished at all.
Going back to how I said the table saw is the most dangerous saw, I think about that every single time I use this thing. I see the blade spinning in front of me, and I think about all the videos I've seen on Instagram Reels of people getting seriously hurt from blowback. That's why on this first cut, I use another clamp to hold the first piece of wood in place. It didn't feel very secure at first, and I didn't want to risk anything. You can also see right here, I did an oopsie. I measured once, cut once. You can probably see that this cut right here is not in the correct spot. And I immediately realized that afterwards. It is way off. Luckily, this piece is not going to be seen very easily, so I just continued, and all the other ones I did properly.
Before I get cutting these grooves in here, I just realized that I never took the hinges into account for the added thickness to the overall. So I actually need to go back and change a whole bunch of things. I just realized my mistake. I cut this block here 3 inches, which it should have been 6 inches, because it would have been 1025 minus the 725, which is the 3 gap here, but it doesn't include the 1.5.
While I was dealing with my massive measurement issues, I just went ahead and cut the top and bottom covers to give myself some sanity.
So not 6, it should be 4.5. So I gotta cut that again.
Now that I got those recut up, the assembly here looked much better. Everything actually lined up properly, and it's looking pretty good this time. Now, the location of the controller mount went through many different design processes, and in the end I decided to just cut the inside board in half to leave a gap in the middle for it to be mounted.
I'm getting pretty good at not measuring before I cut. I cut these 7 inches in the center based off of 21 inches, but this piece is 24 inches. I'm supposed to have a light strip go from here to here, and it's not sagging. Well, luckily I had these scrap pieces nearby. See, I thought about this beforehand, but I wanted it to be smaller, so I changed all the dimensions like halfway into the project, and now stuff like this doesn't fit. Yeah, so the plan here, you drop everything. I'll have this go on here, like this, and then I'll have electrical tape just go over the top of these screws and have the light strip just hang a little bit over the edge. It's not perfect, but I wanted it to be as small as possible, and I just feel like this is the only way to really do that and get a good outcome.
You'll never guess what happened next. I went back and I looked at all the things closed, and it's still a little bit tight. for the measurements. So I went ahead and cut some more pieces just to make everything like exactly the right size. And with that, day 1 comes to an end. As for day 2, it started off really strong with my favorite snack, banana honey peanut butter toast. I really needed it today because I was on the assembly process, and it definitely took a lot longer than I thought it would. I think I really like using wood glue, even though I hate waiting for it to dry. There's something very freeing about making a mess on purpose. It's like playing with dirt, or like if you ever just went baking and just went crazy with the flour. Assembling is always the most exciting part of the process because you finally get to see your project come to life. Until you make a mistake and then you're just filled with the world of dread. I managed to put the screws on the wrong side of one of the pieces, but I felt like it wasn't that big of a deal knowing this is a prototype and that I'm learning, and I should just keep pushing forward. The hinges I bought were nice, but I realized later on that typical hinges are more flimsy than I anticipated, and I definitely will need to find a better solution for these next time. They were especially flimsy when trying to put on the final ones. I had to use all these clamps to keep it from collapsing in on me like Springtrap from FNAF. It's almost completely together, and after that one last final hinge, you can see I'm pretty happy about the results. Opening and closing just as I expected, and the spacing in between turned out really well. Or so I thought.
Okay, so the problem I got going on right now is this down here is too big of a gap in comparison to this, and these are pretty much taut. I just didn't think about that being an issue, and I come to the conclusion that these boards down here are they're a little bit under 3/4 inch, while these are 3/4 inch, and this 1/8 of an inch gap down here is causing everything to be stuck at the top. So I think I need to do just an 1/8 inch board across the whole top of here to raise it up a little bit to be able to get this to be in the middle like it should be. Even though the planer can go down to an 1/8 of an inch, I've never done an 1/8 of an inch before. I just did a 1/4 inch to make those outside pieces, and I'm a little worried that an 1/8 of an inch is just gonna maybe just get destroyed in here because it's too thin.
I wasn't really sure what to expect if something would go wrong, so a lot of times when I was planing this board, I was just standing to the side of there, because if it was like gonna explode or something, hopefully the little metal plate that's on the side of the planer would just absorb any wood chippings instead of going into my leg. This is the plane that is bringing it down to a 1/4 inch, and I've done this before, so I didn't really expect this to happen. When it came out, it actually snapped a little bit. Luckily, it didn't snap like dead in the middle, so I was still able to use the majority of it, and it started bowing. I guess because of the pressure, it was almost like whenever you squish a ribbon against the side of a table, it just curls a little bit, but that was pretty interesting.
After all that planing, I realized that this is wrong, it's like really wrong. And I measured a whole bunch of these. This right here is 1 15/16 small, which matches this light, so that's good. But this side, this is 1 15/16. But this side right here, this is 2 1/16. So I think if I just cut an 1/8 inch off of here on both sides, I think it'll line up properly. I'm just gonna risk it all, and I'm gonna do that now.
So, after one final assembly, I think I was finally satisfied with the current gap it had when it was closed. There's still a few pieces on the inside to keep it from squishing the LEDs, but I already planned for that. After many failed attempts, I finally had a working opening and closing product. So it was finally time to move on to the magnets. I had a lot of different size magnets to work with, so I had to pick the strongest of the bunch, then drill holes for each one and glue it into place with super glue. It didn't help that the drill bit I was using was so old and dull that at some points the wood would smoke from the lack of the bit cutting in.
A real quick side note in the video, I have all these extra magnets and I'm not really sure to do with. And you can see I have a whole bunch of these like really small, I think these are like 1/8 inch wide magnets. They're pretty weak, but like I'm just trying to figure out what could I possibly do with these. If you guys have any ideas, just let me know in the comments.
Now was the most exciting part, the LEDs. I've only ever soldered a few times, so I was really nervous getting into this. Plugging cables in was pretty easy. I mean, I've done that thousands of times, so this part was actually really straightforward. So with that success, I ended on day 2.
Okay, so today's mission, I basically need to figure out how to get my power from the controller in the middle here to the outside of the board. Sorry if I have a sore throat today. I think ideally it would be sitting there. I don't know if I can just cut a cavity out, but that's like pretty big. So I'm not really sure what the game plan is right now.
Yeah, I immediately scratched that idea, and instead I decided that doing that might hurt the structural integrity too much, seeing things are still made out of wood. So I just popped it next to the controller, and I figured I would just cut a small hole in the fabric to plug in the power cable. I'll tell you what, at this point going forward, hot glue is my best friend. At this point, all the magnets were dried and in place, so I started putting all the hinges back on, only to realize that the magnets were not going to be strong enough to keep the light together.
I'm gonna have to get latches.
I always knew the magnets were not going to be a guaranteed success. I was originally going to put latches on anyway. I'm hoping that I might still be able to incorporate some sort of magnets for the second prototype. Now, back to shaking in my boots, I started soldering all the cables to the light strip. I've never done this before and I wasn't sure the best technique to use. I watched a few different tutorials online to get a good idea of how this would go, and it turned out pretty easy when you have the right tools. My old soldering head was very wide and difficult to do the precise work necessary for this job. I had to take a quick break to go to the store and get a more fine tip. If anyone is as nervous as me and wants to give this a try, my best tip I could give is when using your iron, heat up where you're putting the soldering first, then apply the solder. Don't try to heat the soldering in the air and then try to apply it, because it's just going to stick to your soldering iron and not go where you want it to go. You probably saw in the beginning there that it mainly was just sticking to the iron and not actually going on the LED strip. I didn't figure that out until about halfway into this project.
I just finished up soldering all of these here, and I realized that I soldered these here. All of these are potentially touching the metal brackets, and I'm pretty sure that's pretty dangerous, and I might short all this out. So now I gotta rip off, or just like, I don't know, somehow take this off and put some electrical tape underneath there so that there's no way of that making contact with the metal hinges on all four corners. Awesome.
As I was doing this, I took a look at some of the work that I did, and it didn't look very good, so I fixed that as well. As I let out a sigh looking at my hard work, I plugged in the power to a delighted glow. It worked on the first attempt, something that almost never happens in my projects. I also took some extra time fixing the parts of the bend, gluing them in place to prevent any pinch points. And then, as the birds found their nest and I yearned for my supper, something started to feel off. The reality that I'd been avoiding while pushing through to the finish line started to settle into place. I got sick. Setting the project back days, which turned into a week now that I had to catch up on my schoolwork that I also fell behind on. But just as the sun rises to a new day, I continued. I've made it to probably my most hated part of the DIY process, which is sewing. My plan here is to put a white sheet on the front to diffuse the light. I read online that some people would recommend translucent shower curtains, but I don't think the shower curtain would bend very well, so I just went with this fabric instead. I wanted a reflective backing, but I didn't want the very back to be reflective, so I bought an emergency blanket and then got this black sheet of fabric, and I plan on just sewing the black fabric onto the emergency blanket. I think sewing might be one of the most boring things to watch, but going into this is nerve-wracking because it takes a lot of focus and concentration to do it right. I've only ever done this one other time, and I just mended some shirts together. And I'll tell you what, none of my sewing was straight. So let's hope I can do better this time. And a quick quote by Claire Hunter: "Sewing is a way to mark our existence on cloth, patterning our place in the world, voicing our identity, sharing something of ourselves with others, and leaving the indelible evidence of the presence in stitches held fast by our touch."
Check to see if the machine has a compartment that holds extra needles, bobbins, and sewing tools. If you run out.
Starting with the white cloth, I think I did okay on this stitching. I mean, I clearly just didn't know what I was doing. Like, I had the thread tangled up here in the beginning. I don't even know how I did that. Putting the emergency blanket onto the black fabric was so annoying. I didn't take into consideration that the blanket didn't stretch and the black fabric does, so this made sewing the final sheet a little off its measurement, which you'll see later on. Oh, and of course the dumb little stupid bobbin thing down at the bottom. Ran out of thread, like right in the middle of my sewing. And you probably saw a little metal piece right there. Yeah, I wasn't supposed to take that out. I didn't know this at the time, but yeah, it makes it a lot harder to put back together if I do it this way. So as you can see here, it is kind of the same size as this. That's not what the original plan was. I wanted it to be a little bit longer. That way it could go over the top and over the bottom, just for a little bit more clean look. So because that didn't work out here, I just went along and stapled it to the back. I mean, as we already know at this point, it's just a prototype, so it's not that big of a deal just to staple it on. It is the back as well, so like it's not even going to be the highlight of the piece. And all this happened because I didn't take into account that the reflective sheet doesn't stretch. And with that, it's almost completely put together. Now, I did think the front would be more of a diffuser than it is. So next time I think I'll get a thicker fabric, or I might just go with a shower sheet design instead. But I think regardless, it did a pretty good job. I mean, look at that glow. Now, I do have all my lights on in this room, so the fact that it's lighting everything up with all of my lights on, I think it's pretty good for just one LED strip. For the latches, I went with these bronze latches, and it was to match a bronze handle that's on the top. I figured it would just spice up the design a little bit more with a little added color, rather than just being the wood and black and white themed. So as I put the final screws on the hinges and tighten down the last screw on the handle, prototype 1 is done.
Okay, so here's the test with the light. I have the light positioned right here, and I got a few lights on. I have my lamp that I built, and then I have my desk lamp turned on up there. This is with the light off, and then this is with the light on. And I can change the colors with the remote. I also have the white balance. I can make a really cool lighting, or I can make it very warm. I could even make it dimmer or brighter. But yeah, I think overall, I think I'm very happy with how this turned out. It's very bright for, I mean, it looks very bright. You could tell on the camera probably it's very bright. It diffuses the light pretty well. I mean, you can just see how the light is reflecting off my face over here. I think it turned out great. So yeah, I had a lot of fun building this project. I definitely learned a lot from it as well, like a lot with woodworking. Like I said, this is prototype 1, so there'll be a second one on the way. I plan on doing a whole entire 3D model of this one and getting a 3D printer hopefully, and being able to print the whole thing. I used to have a 3D printer, but my space had way too much humidity in it, and I just got rid of it because I was basically poor. I couldn't afford a dehumidifier or anything like that, so I just gave up on trying to 3D print. But I'm in a much better place now, and I definitely want to get a 3D printer again and start other projects, like a projector project with a sort of interesting take on some speakers for my bed here. So if you want to see that, let me know. We'll see which one comes first. But if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. To all the new subscribers, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for sticking around. And like most YouTubers, if you liked the video, leave a like. I'll appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.